and absorb the experience of the concert. Of course, it's difficult because people do like the video. But even at a rock concert, sometimes a musician is, making that suggestion. So what to say in an assembly where there's yoga teachings of Dharma going on. So yeah, if you are getting a little restless, there's the downstairs, the outside, and Rasagya, Meenakshi, and the kitchen crew. They'll be happy to make a little plate. The offering has been made, so prasad is ready, and the children can have a little plate. So last Wednesday, and then this coming Wednesday, Gopal Prabhu, he gave class last week on the glories of Lord Balaram, Krishna's brother, who's a wielder of a plow, club. Beautiful Balaram, wears a bluish like dhoti, has a complexion like milk. He was sharing how Krishna is like a blackish rain cloud, and describing these beautiful qualities, Rupa, the form, the leelas, the pastimes of the Lord. And then before that, the other Sunday, before Tulsi Vallabha gave class, we were reading some verses in the 7th chapter where Srila Prabhupada is saying that Krishna consciousness is relevant in every situation. It's dynamic in the sense that it's not limited to time, place, or circumstance. And we gave the analogy that just like all of us may observe mountains in different ways, some of us may observe the mountains from here, where it looks kind of like a bluish, blackish silhouette, kind of vague outlines. For some others, they may get closer to the mountain and experience more of a localized aspect of the form of the mountain. And then others go right into the mountains, right? They go into the canyons and the caves and the rivers where they see the rocks and they see the different plants and the wild raspberries or apples. They see the trees and the different kinds of leaves. Similar with trees, right? You can see a forest from far away and it just looks like a little greenish kind of merged. There's like a merge of like a bunch of green shades. And you get a little closer and you can start to see the form of the trees. And then if you go into the forest, or like Steve here, he goes into the trees. He's an arborist, so he's directly in the trees with the bugs and leaves and branches and hanging right on there hours a day. Then you really get a personal, you start to even have relationships with trees. I'm sure if you talk to some arborists who are riding on a little higher vibration, some of them have some kind of communion with trees where they may even have a relationship or a dialogue. You ever talk to trees? Okay, and Steve's not a crazy person. He's not just on the tree just talking, randomly because he overdosed on some drugs or he's drunk or something. He's on the trees and he's so tuned in to the environment around him that he may even have a relationship with the trees in such a way where you start to even communicate with them, right? We know there's some great saintly personalities throughout history, just like Saint Francis. I was speaking with Bala Prabhu. How he would be able to commune with the birds and the wolves and the animals. And someone asked Prabhupada, there's this one great saint who would refer to the animals like his family members, like he's communicating with his family members, referring to them as brother and sister, sister death, sister moon, brother sun. And we'd see the animals in that same way. And he would communicate with them as though they were his brother and sisters. And Srila Prabhupada said, this is a Mahabhagavat, meaning this is the greatest of evolved personalities in spiritual life, meaning that they're able to tune in and have communication with all living entities because they understand that Paramatma, Supersoul, is lying within every living entity, and they have that communion with the environment around them. So anyways, we were discussing some verses from the 7th chapter that were describing Krishna's opulences. Krishna comes as a taste of water. He's the original fragrance of the earth, this amazing scent that comes from the earth in the form of flowers. He's the flower-bearing spring in the 10th chapter. So all these different opulences that help us remember about Krishna. And in that class last Wednesday, and this Wednesday if you come, you'll hear more elaboration on Krishna's pastimes and this personality. He's on the altar, he has a threefold bending form, he plays his flute, his eyes are shaped like lotus flowers, he has certain markings on his feet like elephant goad and like a plant, a creeper, a half moon. There's these different markings on his feet. His hair is a certain way. And when you hear this, it almost sounds like Krishna is just like one of us. He's just a person. He has activities and pastimes and relationships. So this just must be like a illusory form of divinity. Divinity must just be some kind of all-pervading energy. But according to the ancients, they say that those who are transcendentalists, they recognize that non-dual Advayam, that non-dual substance, they recognize it as that distant forest or that distant mountain, which is called Brahman, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti. They also transcendentalists, there's other transcendentalists who recognize God in the heart, that inner voice, the Lord dwelling within. And then for those who are on the tree or in the forest very intimately, or in the canyons and caves of the mountains, that's compared to like Bhagavan realization. They develop a very intimate relationship with the Lord. So then when they hear things like Krishna is a taste in water, or the light of the sun and the moon, or Krishna is an all-pervading energy, just like for those who see the sun rays coming in, no problem, hey, the sun is in the room. But for those who know about the sun globe, they experience those rays in connection with that source, very personal. And even those who recognize the sun, there's even another level where there's a personality, the sun god, Vivashvan, Surya Narayan. So on the path of transcendence, there's no limitation. And that which is absolute, eternal, unlimited, can come in any way, can come as an energy, can come as a personality. And so the great ancient yogis, they've compiled these beautiful literatures, and Bhagavad Gita is one such literature. And on Wednesday we have Krishna's appearance. So I thought it would be nice to hear how Krishna speaks to Arjuna, the warrior, about his own appearance, how he is manifest in this world. Does he just, does he come from the union of a man and woman, and then embryos formed, and then he takes birth? No, Krishna is completely absolute, completely transcendental, and is beyond the material modes of nature. In fact, Krishna and all living entities of the spiritual world, they're not made of any of the 8 separated elements, as we were reading a few weeks ago. There's no composition of earth, fire, water, air, or ether. In that spiritual realm, in that realm beyond duality, everything is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Everything is made of eternality, bliss, and knowledge. So it's a little difficult to wrap our intellect around that. What do you mean something is made up of eternality, bliss, and knowledge? Aren't things made up of matter? So in this world of duality, yeah, everything that we see either is the 5 gross elements or 3 subtle elements, the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So with Janmashtami coming up, and on Wednesday you'll definitely hear more pastimes about Krishna. But let's hear what Krishna says about himself. So before we begin, we'll just take a few minutes, and a few weeks ago I did a call and response. A few people appreciated it. This is the Mangalacharan prayers, are what we do every morning. So in the next 23 minutes or so, we'll fit in these beautiful Mangalacharan mantras. We'll chant a little Hare Krishna without the instruments. We'll read a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and we'll see how within 23 minutes you can have a nice kind of power-packed morning session. I know for myself and others that I observe, right away when they get up in the morning, it's very common to turn the cell phone on, make that cup of coffee, and already start thinking what to do. Put on some music, put on the news. Is that true? It's very common today. People get up, they kind of get out of that sort of drowsiness, then they put on the news or some music, they get to the kitchen, they put on some coffee, they start figuring out what to do or what not to do. There's a little music or sound going on. If that cell phone can be put on mute or be taken outside, that would be appreciated. And like I said, it's no problem if you need to go out, but in here, let's keep the cell phones off, sound off, silent mode, thank you. So, where was I? Oh yeah, getting up in the morning. So in this next 22 minutes, I'll say it in phrases, so for those who are interested, you can respond. And these Mangalacharan prayers, even if you don't know the exact definition of them, basically they're prayers of gratitude, recognizing all the bhakti yoga masters in our line. So some of you may come from different traditions, where you also have your invocation prayers, maybe to the saints or the various masters or the teachers or the elders in that particular tradition, and you honor some respect, some gratitude for what they've given. They're like the trailblazers, right? They've shown us the way. Dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. That which we can't really understand, they've given clarity by being trailblazers to help us move carefully along that path of Dharma. And so please repeat. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya evacha Patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Now in unison we can say 10 mantras together. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Namo less than 10 minutes. Could everyone fit that in once a day? Yeah? If you're interested in the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, those Mangalacharan prayers are there. And then the 10 mantras, you can expand that to 108 mantras, or 108, you can do a few more if you like. So one mala is 108 beads. You can do one mala, you can do 2, some of us do 16. But even if you just do 10, you got enough digits on your fingers to keep track of 10 mantras. It takes about 1 minute and 38 seconds. So that's easy. That's about 10 minutes there. Maybe before that you did a little pranayam. Some of you may do some Surya Namaskar in the morning. 10, 15 minutes of a little just physical warm-up. You may do some pranayam, some diloma, niloma, some bastrika, some ujjayi, some kumbhak, some bandhas, whatever it might be. So that might be 15, 20 minutes. And then you can pick a verse from Bhagavad Gita. So with Janmashtami coming up, we'll read from the 4th chapter. And as we read these verses, one thing to keep in mind is Krishna is starting to reveal to Arjuna this guhayam, this ancient system of yoga. Sa evayam maya teda yoga prokta puranaha bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyam idar uttamam. This ancient history of yoga, which is guyam, it's like hidden. It's not very easily revealed, and not very easily understood. There's many, many scholars. I was just talking to Bala this morning, and they may elaborate on the lives of saints. They may speak amazing things about Krishna, and then they say, Krishna, ultimately, you are Krishna. Or this is just Krishna's form. It's just an illusion, just to connect you to the divine unknown, divine all-pervading, formless energy. And they may come up with some kind of interpretation, just with their own kind of scholarly, not even maybe scholarly, but just kind of their own intellectual whims. So Krishna, who's the Yogeshwara, the Lord of all yogis, he says, Arjuna, I'm revealing this today to you, not because you're some powerful warrior. Arjuna was very powerful. He was Atirat, he could fight 10,000, 16,000 warriors single-handedly. Not because you're some powerful, famous warrior, or you're Dhananjaya, you have so much wealth or beauty, he was very handsome. I'm not revealing to you because of that, but I'm revealing this ancient history, this yoga prokta puranaha. Because why? Bhakto si, because you're my bhakta, because you're my devotee, and Sakha, you're my friend. Krishna, I can see in your heart that you're my devotee. Bhakto si me sakha cheti rahasyam. And therefore, this history, this mystery, this kind of mystical mystery, this ancient science of yoga, I will reveal to you. And so therefore, Arjuna had that dainya. He had that humility in his heart. Despite all his worldly credentials, he had that humility, and he wasn't envious. He was a friend of Krishna, and he was a devotee of Krishna, side by side. And Krishna could see, because in your heart, Arjuna, you're not envious of me. You're not trying to deface me. You're not trying to say, yeah, Krishna he has no form, he has no eyes, he's dumb, he's stupid, he has no legs, he can't walk, he can't have relationships, he's just a nothingness. Krishna won't reveal that to someone if they have that envious mentality. But for someone who has that humility in their heart, and even for someone who it may be a mystery, it may be very foreign, as far as like I was saying earlier, Steve's on that tree. For most people, they might just be able to relate to a tree because of the forest sort of composition of a lot of green trees, or the mountain from far away. They might only be able to appreciate it that way, but they're not intentionally saying, no, there's no caves and mountains and leaves and branches and birds. They're just like, I haven't experienced it yet. I haven't experienced the mountains and trees in such an intimate way. This is how I'm experiencing it now, but amazing that there's some who are experiencing it in that manner. I appreciate that. And maybe at some point in my evolution, I will get closer and experience the caves and the chipmunks and the wild raspberries and the granite rocks and the water, etc. But for right now, I can appreciate that silhouette or that kind of merged color of all the greenery. But the person's not envious. They're not saying there's no such thing as chipmunks and caves and granite rocks and gravel and leaves and branches and roots and little bugs inside the trees, and they're not necessarily denying that. They just haven't experienced it yet. But there's some others who hear about it and they intentionally want to say, no, it's not there. They completely deny it. And this is kind of actually offensive to say that someone that's having that intimate experience is not having the experience. Who's to judge that? And who's to judge the unlimited can come in such a way where he's playing a flute and running through the fields with his companions and dancing on the hood of serpents and appearing as the original Lion King, fighting with demons and enjoying the rasa dance with gopis. Who's to limit that unlimited, right? So now Krishna is going to, a few verses later, he's going to reveal to Arjuna, who's his friend and who's his bhakta, about this, the nature of his appearance, how he comes into this world. And like I said, it's okay if it's foreign, and it's okay if one even says, it's not within my experience of reality at this time. And that's no problem. So therefore, Krishna later in the Bhagavad Gita, he'll say things like, well, then when you drink water, just remember divinity. Everyone drinks water. Or when you smell a flower, just think of how divinity has manifested such amazing fragrance within the earth. Or when you feel the wind and the purifying effect of wind, that's Krishna. Or when you see the beautiful Pacific Ocean or the waves of Hawaii, you can think, this Krishna says, of bodies of water, I am the ocean. Or if you're a scuba diver and you see a shark, Krishna says, of aquatics, I am the shark, right? Or if you see an eagle, you can remember Garuda. Or if you see a lion, Krishna says, of beasts, I am the lion. Or if you see a thunderbolt, Krishna says, of weapons, I am the thunderbolt. So for some, that's how they might relate to God, through kind of the grandeur of the opulence of the environment around us. And that's actually described as the first step of God realization. That's in the second canto. And as one continues evolving in their journey, going through the Bhagavatam, they get to the 10th canto, and that's like the smiling face of the Lord. And it's a very natural evolution. Before I read the verse, I remember I was traveling with Lakota elders, spending time with Rastafaris, doing Nayabigi, staying with Trappist monks and Benedictine monks. I was just doing some traveling between the ages of 18 and 19 around the country. And to this day, I don't feel I've rejected any of those experiences. The sweat lodges, the Nayabigi drumming, the drum circles, the meditations. We were doing sweats in the native tradition. They do these rounds. They call them, just like we have japa rounds, they have rounds where they put rocks into the fire, and they're doing different prayers to the ancestors and to the Great Spirit. And it's a very purifying experience. And there's no, I would say, I don't feel any contradiction or any sense of like rejecting one and accepting another. But I see it more as like an evolution of an experience. And so I remember in my journal I was writing, that was like in 1989, 1990. And right around 1991 I was traveling and I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I was doing some mantra meditation. And I was starting to have this experience of like, starting to experience the mountain in more of an intimate way. Starting to experience the water and the rocks and the birds and the trees. And couldn't deny it that there seems to be something very personal. I've been saying give thanks and praise, connecting with the Great Spirit, connecting with the transcendence, with the voice within, with spirit within. And at a certain point, it just started to feel very personal and intimate. And as I was studying the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna conception just like, boom, clicked. It wasn't like someone was threatening me, or my parents, or some religious organization was saying, you better accept Krishna or else you're going to hell, They weren't saying that. And even the different monks I was with, the Trappist monks and the Benedictine monks, they were actually appreciating that I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I didn't have to hide it when I was in the monastery. They were like, oh, what books are you studying? And I was telling them I was reading Bhagavad Gita, and with a few of them, we had very nice dialogue, in fact. And I didn't feel any kind of threat from certain elders that I was associating with. But I couldn't deny the fact that Krishna conception was becoming very prominent in my personal journey. And I remember in my journal, I would refer to like the divine as like Jah or Great Spirit. And then gradually, at a certain time, it was just Krishna. I couldn't help but just write the name Krishna. It wasn't like forced, or there was no intimidation. It just flowed from the heart. That in my journal I would refer to divinity and I would say Krishna. That now there's this very intimate association with the divine personality. So without further ado, let's hear how Krishna describes how he himself appears in this world. So this is in chapter 4, text 6. Ajo pisan avyayatma bhutanam ishvaro pisan Prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavami atma mayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, by my internal energy, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So as we were saying, that original form made up of eternality, bliss, and knowledge, that eternal form beyond duality, even when it comes into this realm, which is influenced by duality, Krishna says, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Sambhavami Atma Mayaya, by the Lord's internal energy. So I'm just going to read a part of the purport here. Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord says that He appears in His own body. He does not change His body as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body, but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever He appears, He does so in the same original body, by His internal potency, antaranga shakti. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in His original, eternal form, with two hands holding a flute. In the Nectar of Devotion, it describes Krishna's 5 different flutes, and even these flutes, how their family members are saying, what an incredible opportunity these flutes have. The flutes are considered the children of the bamboo. How is that described? Or something like that. Anyways, the parents of the bamboo are just like, you're so lucky that you get to be on Krishna's lips and you get to be so intimately connected with Krishna. And Krishna is playing this beautiful flute. And then from that sound of that flute, the 5th note, comes the Gayatri Mantra. And from that Gayatri Mantra is revealed all the Vedic wisdom. Right? So just amazing experience just from that Venu. And then in the Nectar Devotion, it describes different lengths of the flute. There's like longer ones, shorter ones, and the different sounds of them. Some of them are bamboo, some of them have jewels. Very, very intimately described. So 2 hands and holding a flute. And why not? Krishna likes to play a flute. Who can say God can't play a flute? If He wants to play a flute and run through the fields barefoot, He can do that. There's no limitation. He appears exactly in His eternal body, uncontaminated by the material world. Although He appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of the universe, it still appears that He takes His birth like an ordinary living entity. And although His body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But astonishingly enough, He never ages beyond youth. At the time of the Battle of Kurukshetra, Krishna was about 125 years old during that time. He had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age, because He never grows old like us. Although He is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present, and future, neither His body nor His intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of His being in the material world, He's the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in His transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, His appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun has set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary, common living entity, it is evident that He is eternal, blissful knowledge by His internal potency, and He is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet He still appears to take His birth in multi-manifestations. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he's still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayan with 4 hands in the decorations of the 6 kinds of full opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is, and not on mental concoctions or imaginations, which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord's forms to be. The word Maya, or Atma Maya, refers to the Lord's causeless mercy, according to the Vishvakosha dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all his previous appearances and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same, absolute truth, and is without differentiation between his form and self, or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. This is explained in the next verse. So I think Bala might elaborate on the next 2 verses along with Krishna's pastimes on Wednesdays. Krishna is going to describe why he appears, basically because of a lack of dharma. People are forgetting about sacred religious dharmic principles to protect the devotees, to annihilate those, the demoniac. Just like here, you have Hiranyakashipu he wants to murder, kill this little 5-year-old boy, his own son, and then Krishna comes to protect, to have this intimate, sweet relationship to protect Prahlad, and then there's Leela where he annihilates Hiranyakashipu, or the Kaliya serpent, whatever it might be. So that'll be more elaborated this Wednesday around 10 at night, I think. So if you're gonna take a day off work, take Thursday off so you can be here for the midnight party, and that'll be Janmashtami. So just going back to this point, it may seem foreign to some of us, Krishna describing about himself, his transcendental form, and it's not a surprise. There's great yogis, Pantastu Koti Shatavatsara Sampragamyo, Vayoratapi Manaso Muni Pungavana, Sokyastaya Prapadasimnya Vichinkya Tatve, Govindamadi Purusham Tamahang Bhajami. Some of us have done yoga, and we may have come to a point where we've mastered some pranayam, right? We can maybe take 12 seconds of inhalation doing ujjayi, and then we may be able to do some mula bandha, some laks, and then do kumbhak, maybe for a few minutes. And then we exhale. We may be able to extend that even to longer periods. And we may feel, this is revealing to me some deep wisdom by doing this intense pranayam. Or some of us, we may do some asana practice. We may even stay in vriksha. We may be able to sit in siddhasana, maybe for 15 minutes, maybe for half an hour, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours. But then you have Dhruva Maharaj standing on one leg, vrikshasana, for months on end. You have yogis doing kumbhak, where they're suspending the intake. There's pantastu koti shatavatsara sampragamyo. They're drilling the breath, they're drilling the respiration to the point of coming to kumbhak, where they can hold the breath, not for 1 hour, not for 24 hours, for months on end. Basically go into like a hibernation like a frog does. Frogs are natural yogis. There's yogis who try to imitate it, and it's very challenging. And you can just imagine the realizations that would come from 3 months of doing kumbhak yoga. What would come. So it's described in the Brahma Samhita that these persons who are drilling the respiration, doing the highest level of yoga practices, or the highest philosophers who are trying to differentiate matter and spirit, and just unpacking the material elements, the 24 elements, Samkhya, and they're just vigorously studying philosophy, understanding spirit, matter, what's illusion, what's reality, logic, etc. It's described in the Brahma Samhita that they barely come to the tip of the toes of Krishna. They barely get to experience that simple little moment of just the tip of the toes of Krishna. Govindam Adipurusham Tamahang Bhajami. So it's not a surprise that it seems very foreign, that these descriptions of Krishna playing a flute, running through the fields with his companions, dancing with the gopis, dancing on Kaliya, manifesting as a lion, manifesting as a universal form, manifesting as a dwarf incarnation, as a tortoise, as a fish, as a horse. It just seems like, I mean, where's all this coming from? And we can ask ourselves, why am I attracted to watching movies like Lord of the Rings or Avatar or science fiction movies and fantasies and, you know, the Smurfs and My Little Pony, animals that talk? Why is it that as kids, there's simple innocence of appreciating like animals talking and good and evil and friendship qualities and, you know, Ninjago and I'm learning it all because I have a 10-year-old son, so I've learned a lot of these. We're attracted to them because originally there's a reality. This is just a reflection of what must be going on in that realm of reality. And I tell you, with Krishna's pastimes, there's no shortage. And the beautiful thing is you never grow too old. Trust me, these great sages like Shukadeva Goswami, they were on the highest levels. They were warriors, they were emperors, they were philosophers, they were yogis. They were the highest, you could say, humanitarian philanthropists in one sense. Why? Because they were so deeply connected to the transcendence. So that whatever they spoke, whatever they did, brought good fortune to the world. So if we're interested in bringing good fortune to our own self and the world at large, we can begin to appreciate the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and follow in the footsteps of these great ancients. They're trailblazers. It's not that, I got to create my own trail. I tell you, if you go to the Grand Canyon and you try to hike your own trail, I've done it. If you try to go down 18 miles on your own trail, you're probably not going to make it back up. In fact, you'll get so cut up by the rough brush and bushes there, you won't even make it to the bottom. You'll be all sliced up. You've got to like walk the trail. However, although the trail's been made, you still need to walk it. You still need to like stand up, get to the trail, and go for it. And it's intimidating. 12 miles down, 12 miles up, or hiking a 14er. So just because there's trailblazers, it doesn't mean like, I'm not going to walk the path because someone's already walked it. No, you try walking it. You try to do a 14er, or try to climb Mount Everest, or try to go down the Grand Canyon. And even though there's a nice manicured trail, it's still very intense. You still have to prepare for it. You still have to do the discipline to walk it. So similarly, these great yogis, Mahajanas, these great personalities, Dharmasya Tattvam Nihitam Guhayam, they've shown us Dharma is deep within their heart, and they've shown us how to walk that path of Dharma. And it's not easy. It's not easy. There's going to be times when we start, and within 10 minutes, we're going to want to quit. I mean, even an asana yoga class, after 10 minutes, holding a pose, you know, if you're like in Virabhadra asana, or, you know, in some asana where, you know, your muscles start to burn, you're like, I got to get out of this. The teacher's like, 10 more breaths. And you're like, 10, 9. Or you're doing boat pose, and your body starts to shake, and it's just working your core, and you're like, 5 more breaths, no way. And there's great yogis who hold these for days. It's like, no issue. Vrikshasana, Virabhadra asana, no problem to stand in it for hours. So it's not easy. At the same time, the path of bhakti is simple. It's profound, it's simple, and it's very deep. And just by taking this mantra, this Hare Krishna mantra, going deep with it, connecting with Krishna in a very intimate way, and then taking a little time to hear what Yogeshwara, the master of all yogis, what Krishna says about yoga, to appreciate some of the words that Krishna speaks about yoga, and then see where that takes you on your journey. But it's got to be an everyday practice. There's no question, the highest level hikers and expedition persons, they train every day. I guarantee you. They might take 1 day a week off, but even on that day off, they're still doing some kind of training, right? Martial artists, scholars, philosophers, they're training every day because they're going for an A game. They're not into mediocrity. And those who are shooting for high level, they're not, if you're kind of mediocre, you just play tennis for recreation or basketball, you don't really need a coach. You just bounce the ball, shoot a hoop, or hit the ball. But if you're professional, what does every professional player have? What's that? A coach, right? They have someone that's actually observing them and watching how they're progressing and saying, hey, your arm needs to be a little lower, try this. Or, you know, kick the ball this way. Or I'm watching where you're standing on the field and you're a little out of place, maybe try move over here. And the professional player, they're so skilled. They're not like, who are you to tell me? I know. You know, I'm so-and-so. I'm number 1 in the world, actually. I'm not going to listen to you. You don't even play as good as me. No way. They see their coach, and they'll accept the coach's input. So similarly, like Arjuna, he was literally top 5 fighter in the world. No question about it. Him and his brother, they were the Pandavas. They were the 5 highest experienced fighters, administrators, leaders in the world. And yet, they took that humble position. Shishashteham shalimam prapanam. Krishna, now I'm going to be a surrendered. I know I'm expert. I know I'm capable. I'm powerful. And I know that you can show me a little bit more because I'm confused right now. So please guide me. And that's the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna humbling himself before Krishna's presence, being open for what Krishna is going to reveal to him. And then that incredible journey takes place in the rest of the 16 chapters after that second chapter. So with Janmashtami coming up, please dive into your experience of chanting Hare Krishna. You don't need to do 6 months of Kumbhaka Yoga. If you want to stand on one leg for a minute or so, or do Virabhadra Asana, or if you want to come to Jean's class at the Harmonist, or cut some trees with Steve, you can get on a tree. You can experience Krishna's Vibhuti. You can experience yoga in an accommodating way for most of us, but you don't need to do what the ancient Himalayan yogis were doing. Most of us won't be capable of doing that type of yoga. However, one thing we can all do is we can hear and chant. We can hear wisdom culture, and we can chant Hare Krishna mantra, and then keep the body and mind fit with some asana and pranayama, an hour a day or so, half an hour a day, and be happy with that routine. So I did go a little overboard. We started at close to 2, but with just the reading and the chanting, it's about 20 minutes. So I invite you to challenge yourself, whatever path you're on. If you already have a certain scripture you read, go ahead and study that. If you have some yoga practice that you already do that. Some of you may have prayers or mantras that you already chant, go ahead and do that. And if you don't, you can add this Maha Mantra and then see where it takes you. And I can share personally, with all the different traditions and practice I studied, when I started chanting the Maha Mantra, it just took it to a level where I was able to synthesize and harmonize many of those experiences I was having in those various traditions and disciplines and practices. Om Tat Sat, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Krishna Janmashtami Ki Jai. So is Ram Dira here?